We're welcoming Keith today, Keith Bentz, onto our show. So welcome viewers to TINITALK. So Keith has actually been on the show before. So if you haven't actually watched him, you can scroll through our list of podcasts, and he's actually been on speaking about shadow. But today we're going to be talking about rearranging the chairs on the deck of the Titanic, the relationship between content and context. So welcome, Keith.
Thank you.
So
my honor, my pleasure to be here.
Oh, we always like to have you.
Thank you for inviting me again.
No, it's great. Your conversations are really stimulating. So why don't we start with the title, which is Rearranging the Chairs on the Deck of the Titanic, and the relationship between content and context, right?
Okay.
So why don't we start with, so therefore, what is content and context and the link to the Titanic?
Well, rearranging the chairs on the deck of that Titanic refers to making changes in the circumstances around me, my external environment. For example, getting a different job, finding a different partner to be in relationship with, moving to a different place for my home. In other words, making external changes. Okay? So in other words, changing the content in my life. So, but let's go back to what is content and context. So the simplest way to think about it is to use the example of a rainforest and a desert. So it's an analogy, but in the context of desert, when I go to a desert, what do I expect to find? I expect to find sand and cactus and buzzards and coyotes and lizards and snakes and lots of empty space. And there's a certain content that is generated by the context desert. And the context desert means conditions that are hot and dry. That's what context is for desert. As opposed to a rainforest where the context is hot and wet. And there I expect to find vines and huge trees and, all kinds of insects and fish and animals of many kinds. And in fact, a large percentage of the world's animals and insects live in rainforests because of the context. And the context is what generates the content. It makes possible the content. If I take a beautiful orchid from the rainforest and plant it in the desert, it will soon die because the context doesn't support that content, and vice versa. If I take a cactus and plant it in the rainforest, it won't last long because it won't be supported by the context. So if you take that analogy and apply it to us as human beings, each of us has a personal context. And our personal context is made up of, the simplest way to think about it is, made up of all of our fundamental beliefs about ourselves, about other people, about life. Our whole world, our entire world view forms our context.
Okay, so let me just pause you because this is really interesting, right? So I do work with people. You do a lot of work with people. What I'm hearing is context. So if it's my beliefs about myself, my life, I can't see it. It can't be seen.
That's exactly right.
Right?
At the same time, you can't see desert.
Right.
You can see cactus and sand and buzzards and so on, but you can't see desert. So that, that's a very important part. Context in and of itself is invisible to us. I can infer what I do as I look at the content in any situation.
Yeah.
And I infer the context. And so my context as a human being is invisible to me.
Right.
I can tell what it is by looking at the content that that's there in my life.
What I want, can we just slow it down just a little bit more? Because I'm thinking of some of our viewers or listeners where this is new to them.
Okay.
So what are some real life examples of context and content? So I can't see it. So when I'm working with a client, I can't see that they cannot see their own context, maybe, right?
Well,
but but what's the content? So how do we make that?
Well, for example, a simple example is money. So how much money I have in my life is determined by my context, not by my education, not by how hard I work, not by whether I, was born into a family that had a lot of money or didn't have a lot of money. The amount of money that I have in my life is always determined by the context. So if I have beliefs that support me in generating plenty of money in my life, for example, I deserve it, I'm worth it, I'm capable, I'm
easy to come across.
Money is not difficult to find. I'm intelligent, I can do it. Then money will manifest itself. I'll create the content. But if I have beliefs that money is difficult to come by, I don't deserve it, I'm not worth it, because, self-worth and worth, how much I'm worth financially, are very much aligned. If I have beliefs that undermine my ability to make money, then no matter how hard I work, no matter how much education I have, no matter how, no matter what goes on externally, I'll always hit a ceiling that I won't go beyond until I have a breakthrough, until I have a shift in context.
Right.
So a perfect example of this, John D. Rockefeller. Lots of people know him. He's still one of them in America.
Or his family.
Right. He's the original founder of Standard Oil and so on. He had a 4-year high school education and a 2-month course in a bookkeeping school. And that's all. No Stanford, no Harvard business school. And yet he's today considered still one of the richest men ever to walk the planet. Why? Because of the context that he held money in, right, which resulted in. So it's not how hard you work, your education, your family background. He came from a family where his father abandoned the family. He was basically left alone as a son. He didn't have a lot of support, and yet he went on to become one of the richest. So that's an extreme example, but the rule applies to all of us, right?
And what's interesting as a human being, everywhere I go, I'm bringing my context with me, right?
Exactly right.
So I walk into the office, that context remains because it's the foundation from which I operate from.
It is. And as you pointed out, though, my context to me is often invisible.
Right.
Because those beliefs, whether they're supporting me to create excellent results or they're limiting me to create excellent results, I acquire those beliefs at a very early age while I'm growing up. My fundamental beliefs, the real basic ones. And so they become unconscious, which is what you meant when you said my context is invisible. I learn it at a very early age, and after that, I just take it for granted. I say,
right. And it becomes invisible sometimes, right?
That's right. It becomes very invisible. It's invisible to all of us. And so I operate as though, right, this is reality. This is how it is.
Right.
This is just life.
So here's what I notice as a coach, and I'm sure it's the case with you as well. I'm working with a client who has recurrent patterns. It could be in their actions. It could be in their choice of words. It could be in, I don't know, events that keep occurring around them. That's the content.
Right.
Right? And then what we start to identify is connecting these dots and going, so what's the context that's driving this recurrent pattern? Which oftentimes what I notice definitely is that they're blind to it because it's way in the back files of their mind until it surfaces again. And then sustainable shifts start to happen.
Well, what is fundamental is to, instead of saying what I have in my life, all the content in my life is there either by accident or by luck or by circumstances or by things that are outside of me, and to shift to the content in my life is being created by me. consciously or unconsciously, I am the one who's making things happen, who's creating the content that I have in my life, rather than its circumstances. So, a good example of that is if I want to, rearranging the chairs on the deck of the Titanic would be example. I want to have a long-term, loving, intimate, committed relationship with a man or a woman. And so I look around and I see somebody who looks like a likely partner, and we get into a relationship, but after a few months, it's not going that well, and we're arguing, and we have problems and all that. So I say, well, I chose the wrong man or woman. So I get a different one, get rid of my current boyfriend, girlfriend, and find a new one. And it goes along again for 6 months, 9 months, and strangely enough, the same kinds of problems reoccur. Well, I made the bad choice again, so I go and get another one, and same thing keeps recurring over and over again, which is what it means to rearrange the chairs. Means I look outside myself and say, well, what I need to do is I need to change things externally if I'm going to be happy, or if I'm going to be satisfied or fulfilled or have the love that I want in my life. When actually, what you said just now is what's generating my lack of long-term, committed, loving relationships. So I start to look at my beliefs. What beliefs do I have about relationships that keep resulting in relationships that don't last very long and never go very deep? Well, it can be things like, right, if I really commit myself fully, I'm going to get my heart broken because you can't trust men or you can't trust women. Or if I commit myself completely and love, right, I'll be taken advantage of. I won't be treated well. And usually those beliefs go back to examples of my having experienced that, as I was growing up.
Yeah. I have so many directions here that I want to go. Okay. So, if we go back to the analogy of the desert and the rainforest, cactus cannot grow in a rainforest,
right,
nor can the fern grow in a desert, right? How does that? What are some examples that you've encountered for a human being? So if I have some examples. For example, if I live in a context of fear, right, and my girlfriend says, "Oh, come on, let's just be spontaneous," right? Is that effective? Is that because the context doesn't support spontaneity?
Yes, but that brings us to another level, which is another way of thinking about context. Is this is my comfort zone? This is where I feel safe. This is where I've decided I'm going to be successful and I'm going to minimize risk for myself. So there's always, in context that's limiting, there's always a hidden benefit for me. And a lot of it has to do with avoiding risk and being safe. So if I say to myself, I want to start my own company, I want to make a lot of money, and I'm going to, I know the best way to do that is have my own company, not work for somebody else. Working for somebody else, I'll never get rich. So I start my own company, but it fails. Well, from the point of view that we're talking about here, it wasn't that you didn't have the ability to start your own company. It wasn't that you didn't have the ability to succeed. It was he had a belief that, right, if I start my own company, there's going to be big risk. If I fail, I'll look stupid. People will criticize me. People will judge me. If I don't succeed, right, I'll feel like a loser. And so I actually set myself up not to succeed, because it's much safer not to succeed than it is to succeed. If I succeed, oh my God, all this responsibility, all this pressure, all this publicity, everybody looking at me. I don't want that. I'd rather stay safe. So I set myself up to not succeed. Or another good example is losing weight. I look at myself in the mirror and I say, I need to lose 15 kilos, right? If I'm going to be healthy. So I pick a diet, follow the diet religiously, but I don't lose any weight. So I say, Mom, rearrange the chairs on the deck of that Titanic. Must have been the wrong diet. So I pick another diet. Same thing happens.
Or the wrong gym. Or the wrong
gym or the wrong trainer. But I don't lose weight. I never lose weight, no matter what. And I try several different things, and finally, I give up. But what's really going on is the context does not support my goal that I set for myself. And my comfort zone is not to be, looking good, attractive, the right weight for my height. Not my context is to see myself as unattractive, see myself as
just like a rubber band, keep snapping back.
See myself not too sexy, especially in my workshops, I've had this over and over. A woman will say, if I look too sexy, I'm going to attract all these men who are only interested in my body, and that's not the man I want. I want a man who loves me for me. So I don't want to look too attractive. So I make sure I don't lose weight. Or a man says, I want to be big and strong and powerful. I don't want to be pushed around by other men. So I'm going to have lots of body mass because that will make me a powerful man. And so even though it's unhealthy, even though I'm overweight, it's comfortable to stay in that zone where I don't lose weight.
So what I'm hearing is the power in any human being lies in their context. And then from that context grows specific content that is consistent with that context that I'm carrying around in my life.
Right. But it takes courage to face up to the fact that I am creating all the results in my life. Most people, it's easier to be a victim, as we all know, right? It's more comfortable to blame, my failure or my lack of success on somebody or something else than it is to say, I'm creating this by the context, consciously or unconsciously. I'm creating the results. Therefore, if I'm going to break through to a new level, it needs to start with looking at me, and how I think about and a lot of times it means going back to the past and saying, so what happened in my life so that I don't trust men, or what happened in my life so that I'm afraid to fail, so that I assume if I take a big risk, I'm going to fail. What happened in my life? And to honestly confront that.
Yeah. I just want to, for those of you who are listening to this or watching this, is that how you can practice is to just pause and ask yourself, what is my context? Maybe in a particular area, or in an area that might not be working in the way you want it to work, right? What is the context that I carry? And the other thought that I have...
Which is exactly the shift from victim to responsible. Victim is circumstances, luck.
Right. External forces are impacting me.
External circumstances are what is the cause of whether I am happy.
Right.
Because this applies to, we haven't talked about it, but this applies to my emotions too. It applies to my experience of life. So my experience of life, like whether I'm happy or unhappy or angry or sad or excited, motivated or bored, is created by the context, which is another whole level of what we're talking about.
That's so juicy.
So it's not just my external results, not just the amount of money I make or the quality of my relationships. It's my experience of joy, aliveness, freedom, happiness is all created by the context. Just like in a desert, I go out there and it's hot. You could equate that to the emotional, my emotions.
So for if you're watching or listening, for you to just pause and just look at yourself and go, okay, what are some of the areas where I'm either experiencing, having an emotion that's not consistent with the life I want, or getting the results, recurring results, you might take a look at what's the context you have. And I would add in external eyes are really helpful.
Yes, that's a real good point. So having a coach or somebody you know who can talk to, who can see.
Be honest.
Right, who's honest and willing to tell you the truth. Because other people can always see things about me that I can't see for myself.
Yeah.
I mean, it's true of all of us, no matter how, aware and elevated we are. You can see things about me that I cannot see as clearly about myself, and vice versa. It's always true. So having a good coach and say, okay, I keep creating a result that's not what I want. I know, and I realize it's coming from me in some way, but I'm not clear what about my context keeps generating this result. What about my way of thinking is what it really boils down to, my worldview.
Yeah.
What about that? And, one of the simplest things that I found works is to journal, but in a very specific way, which is start out with, sentence completion. So like this, if I constantly have trouble with women, and I realize I don't have a long-term committed relationship because there's something about me that resists committing myself to in a long-term way. I resist commitment, and maybe I resist women. So I start writing. Women are, and I just take whatever comes up. And if I continue with that, not just 2 or 3, but if I write a few pages of women are, for most of us, and I'm willing to be honest with myself, it surfaces beliefs. So when I work with people in a workshop, and we want to get down to, so what did you decide about women at some point? This is what I use. I use it we do it verbally, not written, but it works as a written exercise too. You can surface those beliefs that are otherwise not easy to see.
That's really interesting. And of course, as you're saying that, I work a lot with businesses, people, executives in organizations, themes that come up, authority, my relationship with authority. So it could be authority is.
Right.
It could be bosses are.
Exactly.
Right.
It's a way to get beneath the surface.
Right.
And simple sentence completions like that, actually, if I repeat them over and over, it's a way to kind of dig down into.
And then what? So let's say someone listening here does that. They've identified some beliefs about whatever, organizations, bosses, authority. Right. Then what do they do?
So then you say, so now I see what my context is. I don't trust men. And I'm afraid if I make myself vulnerable, I'll get hurt. And I'm afraid to let anybody get too close to me because I had experiences in the past when I really opened up, somebody rejected me or somebody hurt me, and on and on and on and on like that. And say, okay, so what is the context? That's been my context. What is the context that I'm committed to creating? So I take charge of it. Okay. What will I need to risk? Okay, I'm going to need to risk trusting a man or a woman. I'm going to need to risk being honest. I'm going to need to risk being open. I'm going to need to risk being vulnerable. So I get clear. I see what my context has been. What is the context I'm committed to creating? And of course, I'm not going to be perfect. But then I have something that I'm aiming at, and I can remind myself, okay, I'm going out on a date with you. How am I going to be? Okay, I'm going to be open. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to trust. I'm going to be committed. I'm going to consciously shift my context.
So you're going to design a new context or shift to a new context. And the word that I'm hearing is taking a risk.
Yes.
Which is do something different.
That's back to comfort zone.
Right.
If I stay in my comfort zone, and that
so juicy. Oh my God.
It's nice and safe.
Yeah.
But then I keep repeating it. The thing about a comfort zone is I keep repeating the past. That's
right.
right?
And it's comfortable and it's predictable. And when I break up with this guy, I get to be right. I was right. Men can't be trusted.
Exactly right. I reaffirm I prove I'm right.
Yeah, which is what human beings love to do, right? Wow.
I always, it's a cliche, but as a human being, I'd rather be right than be happy.
All right, so we're going to start to wrap this up. This is so juicy, and I love this topic, content and context.
I want to read a little absolute proof of what we're talking about, which is the example of money, and I won't take very long with it, but the example that proves what we're talking about is absolutely true is people who win the lottery win millions of dollars and then end up within a year or two losing it all. Either they spend it all, they get it stolen from them, they give it all away, and before long, they're back to exactly where they started, back in the same comfort zone regarding money. So just let me read you. This is on the, you can all Google this. It's on the internet. I just Googled 21 lottery winners who lost it all. Okay, Michael Carroll was a garbage man in England. Age 19, won 9.7 million pounds, about $14 million at the time, in the lottery in 2002. A mansion, drugs, and gold jewelry ate up the money. By 2012, he was broke. Living off unemployment checks, now he works in a slaughterhouse, making £400 a week. So, context.
It just snaps everything back to context.
Right? His context was money's scarce, money's hard to come by. What's comfortable, his comfort zone is, as many of our comfort zone is struggling constantly to make money. Or, here's another one. Janet Leigh won $18 million in 1993. Although her gambling habit reportedly cost her more than $300 a year, she may have spent more on charitable and political donations. Her generosity included a $1 million gift for Washington University to build a new library in 2001. In 2001, she filed for bankruptcy. $19 million.
Wow. This is so juicy. And it's all of these podcasts for Tini Talk is around peeling the layers of the onion that makes up the human being. Yeah. I think this is one of the big fundamental pieces.
When you read this stuff, a lot of people say, well, yeah, those people were stupid. I wouldn't, if I won $20 million, I wouldn't, I didn't know how to hang on to it. But actually, maybe, and maybe not. Whether you hung on to it or even doubled it or tripled it would depend not on having $19 million as these show. I mean, there's a whole long list. That's just a couple of. Yeah. It would depend on the context.
Yeah. Any finishing words, parting words for the audience?
Well, this shift from circumstance, rearranging the chairs, what I need, if I'm going to be happy, if I'm going to have success, if I'm going to have the results that I want, it means changing things externally versus seeing the shift to I'm creating this by how I think is what it really boils down to. By the
lenses through
by the way I look at the world. That's the basic shift.
Yeah, which takes a lot of courage.
Which is the work that you do with people and the work that I do with.
Absolutely,
it's not about changing things externally because that's temporary.
Yeah,
if I get a new job, things might be great for a while.
Yeah,
but if I don't change the context, I'm going to end up where I was in the old job.
But it's a new company. New company, same situation. Thank you so much for being with us again. Really great. Maybe we'll see you in another
Thank
podcast.
You. My pleasure. I hope it's useful for...
Very, very juicy. Very useful.
Thanks.
So thank you for joining us in that very stimulating conversation. So one of the areas I'd love to leave you with is where do you assign power in your life? So do you assign power to the content of your life, or do you assign power to the context or that which is driving the content? All right. So that's one thing to think about. The other thing is, who are you allowing, or who can you invite to be your feedback? People who you feel are honest with you, people who you trust, who could start to be your feedback channel to see some patterns that might be helpful for you to see what the content is. And then together you can figure out, gosh, is that context working for me? At the end of the day, the work that we do is really to support you to design a future that's really compelling for you. All right, so thank you so much for joining us, guys. See you on a podcast in the future.